Hello and welcome to the 338th episode of the Board Game Barrage podcast. My name is Mark. I am the Green Tank. I am joined by Neil and the Orange Tank.
Hello.
And Kellen the Red Tank.
Yes, sir.
And today we are bringing back the top 5 list. We are going to be looking at our top 5 most anticipated games from Gen Con 2025. Top 5 and 25 for Gen Con. We, as far as I know, we're not going to go there. Any of you planning a last minute trip to Gen Con to Indianapolis?
It gets less and less likely by the week. I always hang this hope that maybe I'll just turn around and be like, yeah, sure, why not? I'll just rock up in Indy. But I don't know. It doesn't seem likely this year, unfortunately.
It's so hot there. You know?
Yeah.
Yeah, it is so hot there.
It's so hot there.
What do you mean it's so hot there?
Wait, isn't it hot in LA too?
No,
not that bad.
Indy hot.
Yeah, it's not Indy hot.
Okay, well,
you're laughing.
Anywhere is
Vegas.
less hot than where I am.
Yeah, we know.
Yes.
You live in Las Vegas. There's
Okay, no,
free
I know, but why you
strippers
bring up the
everywhere you
heat
go.
every day?
The Taco Bell cantina serves alcohol. The air conditionings are on 24/7.
It is almost 9 o'clock and it's 110 degrees.
Wow.
Indianapolis being hot.
110
So-
right
It's a
now.
dry heat. It's a dry heat.
Yeah, it is a dry heat. Thank goodness
Wow.
it's a dry heat. But yeah, the way I know Gen Con has the door shut to me is when I know that the math trade has kicked off and I am not in it.
Got it.
Once that happens, I'm done.
Yeah.
I'm out. But while we'll be out, you all will be in as we regale you with our top 5 list of games we are interested to hear more about coming out at Gen Con 2025. But before we do that, Neelan and I are going to be talking about some games we've played. Kellen has been way too busy. So we are going to be talking about... Yeah, that's right. He's making deals and buying stock and selling bonds and all that kind of stuff. So he can't be bothered
I'm
by
not a
trivialities
day
of
trader,
playing
Mark.
games.
I sell
You're a
video
big
games for a
businessman.
living. You're making it sound like I work at Citadel, and that I'm the bad guy in the Big Short movie.
Well, you're a bad guy, but not because you work for Citadel. Anyhow, we're going to be talking about the games we've played. Neelan is going to talk to us about, it's either called Line of Fire : Burnt Moon or Burnt Moon : Line of Fire.
Yeah.
There was some
Now-
confusion as to which.
Honestly, you having now said both, I've actually genuinely forgotten which one it is.
Perfect. I love it. So before he can figure out what it is, I'm going to throw it to him. Neelan, tell us about the game.
Oh, God. Now I actually have to look it up. You're the worst. Okay. It is Line of Fire, Burnt Moon.
It should
This
be
is
the
a
other
weird-
way, right?
Maybe. Well,
yeah, I agree.
Well, here's the weird thing. It should kind of be neither.
Okay,
because
great.
for all intents and purposes, this is an Undaunted game. And I don't even
Oh.
mean that they're using some of the mechanics from Undaunted. It is literally set in the same world that they established with Undaunted Callisto. And
The
it
sci-fi.
uses...
I was isn't Undaunted in the world of World War II?
Well, yeah.
What are you
but,
talking
Well, no. But Callisto, the
Yes,
sci-fi
the
one,
sci-fi
the Callisto,
ripoff.
yeah,
Or
exactly.
Not ripoff, yeah.
Yeah. The Undaunted Callisto is the new thematic direction is like the moons of Jupiter. This is literally the same setting, and this is literally pared down Undaunted. I don't really understand why it just doesn't use the Undaunted name in some capacity. But anyway, that's actually plenty of setup for what this is. This was sent to us as a review copy by Osprey Games. This is a game that uses the card system from Undaunted, which is to say that it is a deck builder. It is a lane battling deck builder where you have a starter deck of cards. You have 5 lanes in front of you. And on your turn, you are going to be doing the things that you do in every round of Undaunted. You're going to choose one card to play secretly as your initiative. You go 3, 2, 1, reveal. Whoever has the higher initiative takes their turn first, which is always a really, really, really big consideration in Undaunted and in Line of Fire, because if you inflict a casualty on your turn, that casualty comes from the opponent's hand. So if you take the first turn, you're possibly inflicting a loss of an action on them this round. So initiative consideration is always very, very tense. And the reason that is because that card you're using for initiative, usually the better ones are also the better actions you have available. So it's do you burn a good action to take initiative first? It's the hallmark of what makes Undaunted really, really good for me. And it's preserved in Line of Fire. But what you're doing on your turn, once you have the initiative, once you're playing out your round, you are putting these cards out into one of these 5 lanes or activating them if they were already there. So in the same way that you would deploy units to the map in Undaunted, you're kind of deploying them to these lanes. But the one thing that makes that quite critically different is it's the same cards. If you deploy a card to a lane, it's no longer in your deck and is no longer available to activate that unit. So there's this very interesting trade-off introduced now between, do I deploy this to give myself board presence, or do I keep it in my deck to give myself actions for those units? And where this gets especially weird is the amounts of each of these cards you have available is so thin. So for some of the unit types, there are only 3 cards available total. So it's literally the consideration of, do I have 1 in my lanes and get to activate it twice, or 2 in my lanes and get to activate it half as much? You could theoretically put all 3 out just to like take up space and like claim majorities, but then you're never going to be activating them. So it's really, really tight in the margins when you're kind of making these decisions. What you're trying to do is get majorities in lanes and eventually sort of take control of those lanes. You can only take control of a lane if you have majority just by number of cards in that lane, and then you get a certain number of victory points that that lane is worth. You randomize these tiles at the start of the game that determine what they're worth to you and what they're worth to your opponent, and those pairs aren't always matched. So it might work out that like a lane that's worth 3 points for me is worth 1 point for my opponent, or vice versa, or they're evenly matched. So there's a big consideration early on of, do you commit to the high scoring lanes? Do you commit to the defendable lanes? There's kind of an inverse relationship between whether they're high scoring and what their defense value is, and how you're going to try to like scrabble your way to the 8 points you need in order to win. This is billed as a very short, quick, breezy version of Undaunted. The box says 30 minutes. That was not my experience playing it. I played a few rounds of this with our good friend Brandon over at Optimal Play. He should have a video up of us playing this shortly. And in all of those games, we kind of felt like it went a lot longer than it ought to, except for one game where it kind of was just like, it kind of snowballed very quickly. But for the rest of the games, it kind of just felt like it was over an hour in a way that just kind of felt a little bit too drawn out, a little bit too long, a little bit hard to like really claw victory once you are kind of well set up. It kind of felt like it was too possible to kind of draw the match out in a way that you would have to, obviously, if you were on the losing side. There are some interesting systems in here that I quite liked. One of the changes that's quite significant is there's no more dice rolling. All of the combat is purely deterministic, but that ends up feeling quite mathy as a result, where you're looking at every lane trying to be like, okay, if my attack is higher, then I know I can do an attack action and inflict a casualty here. But you're kind of evaluating that too often, it felt, rather than being like, okay, I'm going to sort of take a shot at this. I know what the defense is, roll dice, hope for the best. You can never get those like Hail Mary shots like you can in Undaunted, which I get the sense that Kellen would like that aspect of it. But I do think that the game does feel like it's not all the way there in terms of how strangled it can feel and sort of how drawn out it can become. Like, it doesn't feel as snappy as you want it to be. And that was a bit of a bummer.
It looks pretty.
Yeah, it's lovely. I will say that the revision that they've done since the Callisto line, like having very vibrant, colorful sci-fi artwork, the card art is incredible. In fact, I would say the production across the board is really, really lovely. I just really wish that I got the sense that this could be like a worthy Undaunted replacement for me, because if this was giving me everything I loved about Undaunted, but was strictly half an hour to play, because one thing as well is the setup for this is like a dream compared to Undaunted. But it's just a bummer. It's just not quite hitting the mark for me, unfortunately.
In the sort of lane battler, I just feel like this is a very, crowded? I was looking for a smarter word than crowded, but crowded area. And how do you feel like this
overpopulated?
I don't know. That has more letters, but is that like, am I smarter for overpopulated?
Yeah.
I don't know. Oh, confirmed? Yeah. Okay. So it doesn't do anything that makes you go, oh, this is like way differentiated, essentially.
Not really. And I think one of the things that's harder, especially, well, I guess differentiating in the sense that they are bringing elements from a game that, if you have familiarity with this series, you'll at least get that appeal. Like, hey, this is something I recognize. Like, that's something. But in the genre, no, I don't know that it's not winning out over like Rift Force for me, for example.
Right, but there's also Omen, A Reign of War, Air, Land, and Sea, Compile, 100%. Shot and Totten, Battle Line, Hanami Koji, Radlands, again, and so it's like this is somewhere near the bottom, and those are all really good games. There's a lot more lane battlers that exist.
Totally.
But, yeah.
For what it's worth, it does feel like a slight notch in complexity higher than a lot of the conventions of the genre, but I don't think it's like it's not getting to like a greater whole as a result of that complexity. I don't think, which is that's the bigger bummer for me. But yeah, that is Line of Fire Burnt Moon by Osprey Games.
Have you heard, Neelan, about the new Commander format for Magic that just came out?
Yeah, it kind of seems to be like the most popular way to play. Wait, as in they changed Commander, you mean?
No,
like
as in there's a new draft Commander format that just came out.
No.
And like it actually feels like it's called Pick 2 Draft, and they just debuted it, but it's a 4-player Commander draft variant that uses like less cards. I don't exactly know because I don't know how to play Commander, but I always think about these games sort of just like emulating Magic in 100,000 different ways, and like, is it like, should I just casually play Magic? And I saw this new format, and I was like, well, we should try this. Again, we're not going to go down that rabbit hole, but
no, totally. Yeah, we should probably make that happen in some capacity at some point. But yeah, my quick answer would be no. We should not start playing Magic.
Neelan, think about it. You bought all the Final Fantasy cards.
I did. I still haven't played them.
Yeah, you didn't bring that up on the podcast that you spend $700,000 on all the Final Fantasy cards?
I bought one starter pack. I did not spend
one starter pack? You're a liar.
Yeah. I think you're confusing me with Daniel, actually. He's the one who went all in.
Okay. Yeah, he was talking. He's like cruising around Los Angeles looking for stores. We've got a problem.
All right. I got a chance to play Rise, designed by Remo Canzadori and Marco Pranzo, and published by Capstone Games. In Rise, you are, much like Helen, a captain of some sort of industry, trying to build up your city during what I think is the Industrial Revolution, I believe. But what the game really is about to become evident once you start taking the pieces out of the box, starting with the main board, or should I say, putting the main board together. So to clarify, the way you create the main board you're going to be playing on is by placing 10 mini boards together and placing your own player markers on each of the boards. A closer inspection of each of these boards will reveal they look conspicuously like tracks. And in fact, if this game had been renamed Tracks rather than Rise, it might have been a more accurate description of what is going on in the game.
Right off the bat, Mark, looking at pictures of this and basing your description, there's a heavy like Yokohama vibe to that.
Sure. Yeah. Well, in terms of the separate parts making up the whole board,
exactly.
That nature of it. Yeah.
Is there like a randomization component to like what boards are in play?
Yeah, so each board has an A and B side, but instead of the Yokohama, where they were all representing shops, right?
And there was adjacency, though.
That's true here.
Yeah. So
these are
there's no adjacency.
These are
here.
10 tracks jammed
10
together.
tracks.
Okay. Perfect.
10 tracks jammed together. Even the geography of the tracks means nothing.
Even the BGG says its description is ascend on the tracks and manage your city! !
There you go.
That's the short. That's the sell. That's how you sell it.
Thematic.
Imagine someone at Gen Con shouting to you, ascend on the tracks and manage your city.
That's right.
It would need a lot of gusto
That's true. You would really need some cosplay, I think, to really sell it.
Yeah, that's
So what you're trying to do in Rise is basically move up these 10 tracks with the goal of scoring the most victory points at the end. Surprise, surprise. Before I talk about how you actually move the tracks, a few words about the tracks themselves. Thankfully, all our joking aside, there is a variety between the tracks. Some tracks give you income. Some tracks will reduce the cost of placing your pawns, which I'm going to get to in a second. Some tracks will, unsurprisingly, move you up other tracks. Some tracks move you up tracks that are harder to move up. So these tracks move you up the rarer tracks. I'm using tracks a lot, and I'm going to continue to do so, unfortunately. So there's a wide variety of flavors of tracks. And while it may sound like I'm paying lip service to them by calling them that, there is certainly a different feeling to the different tracks and what you're able to do by going up different ones. Thankfully, the way you move up these tracks, which is via an action selection mechanism, is quite clever and makes for some interesting decisions. The way it works is every round you're going to have 4 action cards that you're going to be selecting from, and then 3 event cards dispersed in between. So you're going to have action card, then an event card, action card, event card. So 7 cards made up of 4 action cards with 3 event cards in between them. Once all the players have selected their action, so you pick one of the 4 action cards, you put your pawn on it, multiplayers can select the same one, then the row of cards are going to fire off from left to right in such a way that if you place your pawn after an event card, you get the benefit of the event card. So for example, if I place my pawn on the very first action, which costs 0 and they get more and more expensive, so the first one costs 0, second one costs 1, all the way to the 4th card costing 3. And this is a game where money is quite tight, so making the sacrifice to move up on a later action card is quite costly. But anyway, if I place my action card on the very first one for free, I take my action first because it fires off first, but I don't get the benefit of the event card that comes after it because my card will have fired off first. Conversely, if Kellen pays 3 coins to go on the very far right action card, he gets the benefit of all the event cards that fire off before we get to his action card. And that's basically how it works. You're going to be playing 3 ages in this sort of style. Each age is a tiered selection of action cards that you're going to be selecting from until the deck runs out and the game's over, and then you total up how many points you've gotten, and that is Rise. I have to admit, coming into the game, seeing that it was such a tracks on tracks focused game, I wasn't too hopeful about how I'd receive it and how much I'd like it. And to be frank, it's not a game, even after playing it, that I would say that I love. However, the turns are quite snappy, and again, that action selection mechanism does make for a lot of interesting decisions about how much you're willing to pay to have, again, more event cards fire off before your action cards. I haven't mentioned how the action cards work. Once it gets to your action card, you're basically going to select from 2 options, a free one, which is usually moving like a couple of tracks. Like the free option on an action card might be like move up the science track twice. Or it'll give you another option, which is something you have to pay for, like maybe pay 2 coins or pay 3 coins to, for example, move up the science track twice and move up the income track. So every time it comes to your turn, you're going to be selecting from a free set of track movements or paying for more of them. Also, as I mentioned, thankfully, the different tracks do have different flavors to them. Moving up the income track is difficult to do so and costly in different ways. The science track helps you, again, bounce off other tracks. There's a track that discounts the action selection, so instead of paying 3 coins for the most costly action, you might pay 0 if you move up this track. So there is, again, a unique feel to the different tracks, and the B-sides have even more options to choose from. I'm not really a big fan of the Clever series of roll and write games, the Ganshan Clever and all those. But this felt like something in that mold. Very combo-rific, relatively quick moving. And I'm not sure what it was about this game, but I found myself enjoying it quite a bit more than those sort of similar roll and writes. I'm not sure if it's the fact that I feel like roll and writes feel a little trivial because they're so small and quick and you sort of like play them without really feeling like you've done too much usually. And perhaps this having more of a literal presence on the board made it feel a little more substantial. I'm not sure if that's what it is. I suspect it was more than that, and it might just be that the action selection mechanism I found interesting. But for all that, I did enjoy Rise. Not going to be anywhere near my top 50 games of all time or anything like that, but a solid game that I would play again, I think, and that I would say that if you are a fan of combo heavy games with quick turns like the Ganshan Clever games and all that stuff, a game that I think might have flew under the radar for you and one that I recommend for folks who really like those kind of games. If those kind of games are not your thing at all, then I don't think this is going to be, a fix to that for you. But if you're maybe somewhere in between, like you like the occasional combo-y sort of games, then I would certainly say give Rise a try. Again, it moves fast, and that action selection is enough to make it more than just like a bouncing up tracks game, I think. So anyway, that is Rise, designed by Remo Canzadori and Marco Pranzo and published by Capstone.
I like the sound of this. I'm actually surprised, given that it's a Capstone game, that came out at a time where, I was, paying relatively close attention to their output. That this kind of, like you said, just slipped under the radar. It seems up my alley for sure.
Yeah, I think I found this game, on a bargain bin or some sale, so it does not seem to have really taken a foothold. But, and then, again, when I saw the track thing, I was a little worried that it was going to be something that was very rote or boring, but yeah, had more than I expected and made for a good experience. I think you'd like it. I suspect that the sound of this is not for you, Kellen.
Yeah, I mean, I think the quicker.
You like the Ganshan game.
I do,
game,
but then
yeah.
when you port them into larger games like Cascadero,
yeah.
I like it, but I don't love it, and I'd rather just do that.
I get
and
it.
so I would play this, and I'll bet you I would enjoy it 2 in like a 1-game setting.
Yeah.
But again, the closer this would get to like 50 minutes, the happier I would probably be, would be my guess.
Yeah, I get you. And I think that's probably where you want it to be. You don't want this dragging out too much if you can avoid it. All right. Before we move on to the Gen Con preview, just a reminder that there are a couple ways to help out the show if you like it. One being leaving us a review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you found this podcast. We're going to read a quick one here. This comes from Enjoying the Light, and it's titled, Finally, Excellent and Thorough. This podcast gives the best descriptions of games, how they are played, the physicals, and the pros and cons. The physicals is an interesting word.
Yeah.
Then, a big plus, their banter works. That's nice. They have dynamic relationships and are intelligent and fun. Well, at least 2 of them are. Just kidding, I added that.
Does it say that, or
Perfecto.
did you add that?
It does not say
It does not
that.
say that. Joke. It's a joke. It's a joke. Our listeners would never say something so cruel. Only I would. But thank you, Enjoying the Light. And again, that is a free way to help boost the show, and that would mean a lot to us if you can do that. If you want to do even more, you can, of course, join our Patreon at boardgamebarrage.com/Patreon or patreon.com/boardgamebarrage, where we release bonus episodes. It'll allow you entry into our Patreon-only Discord, which are really fun rooms in our Discord to talk to other patrons and to talk to us, and also obviously allows you, if you're coming to Dice Tower in March of next year, entry into the exclusive game night. That is always my highlight for me, game night at my house. So a lot of perks to being a patron. And so, well, yeah, consider doing that if you are interested in doing that. And with all that said, let's move on to the land of Indianapolis, where the heat blazes. It's so hot in Indianapolis that you can't get Callan within 500 miles.
I've been to Gen
so
Con
hot.
dozens of times compared to you.
Yeah, I know, but this time the heat of Indianapolis.
I see,
Scorching.
got me. Yeah.
The world-renowned heat.
All right.
And I think Indianapolis in Latin translates into ball of fire. And so we won't be able to make it there. We're not properly equipped to make it. But we are equipped to look into the games that are being shown there and sold there and debuting there. And so we have made a list of the top 5 games that we're most interested in getting more info on. And so we'll go around talking about those. And let's start up with, let's go in alphabetical order. Kellen.
You always get me. Sometimes with alphabetical, it's like, isn't there a part of the alphabet where you kind of have to go like KLMN, you know what I mean? And like think about it.
I was just thinking that.
Yeah.
If Christina's name was Listina, we would have KLMN.
Listerina?
Unfortunately,
What? How
she's broken.
dare you call her Listerina?
If it was, it would be KLMN. We would be perfect.
Yeah.
We are now KMN.
Yeah.
You ever think of that?
If wishes and butts or candy and nuts, we'd all have a Merry Christmas.
I've never
I
heard
think
that
that's-
before in my life.
I've heard what I think is that. I've definitely heard the same cadence in a saying. I think Kellen said it right, but I'm not sure. But it never really made sense, although I get the gist of it.
Well,
But how about we pool some of that patron money? How much does it cost to get a name change?
no,
You
we're
think
not doing
Christina would
that.
be into?
I couldn't date someone named after like a mouthwash product.
Why? It'd be,
What? Yeah. All right.
be the
all right.
fresh.
only person out there doing
This-
it. All right, let's go.
This banter is not working.
We were just, what was it? What was the name?
Praise
Enjoying
for
the
it.
Lights.
Yeah.
Their banter works. Yeah.
Yeah, it's ended here.
This is what they...
All right. The first game, and okay, the Gen Con preview is a great tool where you can look at all the games coming out, but it is increasingly unclear, like, when has a game come out? When has the Kickstarter ended? When has it fulfilled? And is it just a demo or is it for sale? So I think some of the games on my list are Kickstarters that are either being fulfilled or demoed at this point. The first one that I wanted to highlight because the premise works for me is called Party Panda Pirates. Triple P. Party Panda Pirates. I think that looking at the cover of this game reminds me of board game, like silly, stupid board games that came out like 10 years ago when I was more junior in the hobby for whatever reason. I don't know why. But this is essentially like, and okay, remember the slogan for Rise, right? You know, like, this is a game about tracks. Nerd, exclamation mark. This one says Panda Pirates sail in search of fun minigames. that would be enough on its own.
Okay.
But then, inspired by Mario Party. So this is a 45-minute to 1 hour game where you are playing sort of a on-the-table board game and then doing mini games where you are literally doing like dexterity games. But basically, there's this archipelago of stupidity, and you're playing. Have you played Mario Party? Either, I'm sure you have.
Yeah.
Mark, have you played Mario Party?
Yes.
And it's a bona fide success. It's a winner. So if you could replicate that as a board game, you would say, what would you say, Mark? You just said yes, so I was assuming the yeses were going to keep coming.
If I was going to replicate Mario Party as a board game, what would I say?
God. No, you would be excited about it. You would have exclamation.
I would be excited. That's
you
what
would rise.
I would say exclamation.
As they say.
I see.
I mean, but not on this podcast because that's only for the After Dark one. This is Party Panda Pirates. I think there's also some expansions for this. I don't know. I can't tell if this was a Kickstarter. It probably was. I like the idea of it. If this could get in, get out of the way, I think this could be really fun. It brings me back. That's my number 5.
All right. My number 5 is Tabriz. This comes to us from Randy Flynn, the designer of Cascadia. I find myself looking for a collection of like lighter games that I can teach really quick when we have friends over, or that Roselle will be interested in playing, just lighter stuff that doesn't require a 45-minute teach. And so Tabriz, from what I understand, feels like it fills that spot. It's a 30 to 60-minute game. I'm hearing that it's a lot like games like Splendor or Century Spice Road without being called a Splendor killer, thankfully. But it seems like a very beautiful production. Cascadia was a really solid family weight game that I felt that I could teach to a lot of folks that were new to the hobby, and yet I could enjoy myself and they would enjoy it. And so I'm hoping Tabriz seems to be something like, again, in that mold, family weight, but with enough there for folks that are more in the hobby to enjoy. So a game I'm looking forward to being able to play with a lot of others. That is Tabriz.
Yeah, this looks lovely. This is a great realm to be in, where it's like it's got board presence, it's got great art, but it is just like a very light, relatively fast game. Like I'm on board. That sounds great.
Yep.
My number 5 is always like my wild card slot. It is going to be The Lost Command. This is a deck building game that is themed around starship battles. So each player is a commander of a starship, and it's a deck builder where you actually are building 2 decks. One which is kind of the systems, that is all the systems that sort of describe your starship, I guess, and another deck is what is going to be all the crew manning the starship. So you're kind of like have these 2 decks in like tandem feeding off of each other, and you're simulating the idea of moving around with your starship, firing off shots, raising your shields, all of kind of that jazz that you kind of recognize from something like a Star Trek, which is why it was like instantly sort of like jumped out at me. I think 2-player deck builders are, again, kind of like what I was saying about Tabriz, like where they are like very light, they have like big splashy board presence, but aren't going to overstay their welcome. That's very appealing to me, and especially one that's like themed around something that like is just something I've always wanted to see replicated in the board game. Stuff like Space Cadets was trying to do the same thing, but never really hit for me. This kind of brings it down to like a genre that I really, really like, which is deck building. So yeah, that is The Lost Command by Ty MacDonald.
My number 4 game is coming to us from the designer, and I'm going to butcher all of these names, Kayo Miyano, who created Nana. And this is a reimplementation of a game they made called Dog Poker, but now being published by Allplay and getting sort of a release outside of Japan, or a limited release. And the artist is Sai Beppu. People love their art as well, having done like the Haggis reimplementation. People know Sai, right? You guys know who this is, this artist, right?
Yeah, I mean,
definitely would recognize the art.
By the couple of games. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I think the ones that I remember, Nana just definitely like such a distinct style.
The next game on my list, is art by
Okay.
Sai.
Yeah, great. Cool. So I think that, I don't know if it's just the structure of my life being incredibly chaotic right now, but I'm drawn to the sort of simple stuff that I know I might like. So essentially the thing here, and I've always wanted to play dog poker, but never got around to it. I think I have a copy somewhere around here. I think it's essentially that you're doing a drafting game, but at the beginning of the game, each player is also somehow picking a scoring condition, and those scoring conditions are getting revealed as you draft, so you don't know everything as you go. But this is just a light, simple, cute llamas in the game. I'm sure I could get it played trifle, but those are sometimes exactly what you need, and I will be very excited to play Llama later in the year. Will it get me to step out into the raging inferno that is Indianapolis? Probably not, but that is there. That's my number 4, Llama. But also, I'm tired of the, like, you know, llama. It's like, oh, it's llama dice. You're just like, let's get real about these themes. You know what I mean? What is the theme here? That there's a lot of llamas? That's not a theme.
I get.
It's an animal.
You're the one who picked Party Panda Pirates before. So
No. Don't bring Party Panda Pirates into this, Mark. How dare you? That has a fully realized universe. There's an archipelago. This game is just the word llama repeated. You can do that with any animal. That's not a theme. It's a species.
Right. Party Pandas Pirates or whatever is a much more sophisticated title.
Thank you, Mark.
You're right.
Thank you for seeing reason.
I withdraw my complaint. All right, my next game is, again, art by Sai Beppu. This is designed by Shintaro Ono, and this is Tearable Quest, and not Terrible, Terrible, terrible as in tearing things, and that is a play on words that I did not get until speaking it out now on the podcast, so I didn't get that this was a play on that. So in Tearable Quest, you can play with up to 50 players. That's always a great sign. Apparently it takes about 10 minutes. And,
it's not always a
it will not
sign. That's always the first way you know it's a banger.
Yeah.
The more people that can play.
The bigger the number of players.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. The amount of people.
The old saying.
Yeah. It's not an orgy if there's not 50.
That's right. That's right. But the reason I put this game on my list is just how odd it is. So I guess the idea is everybody's going to get a sheet of paper with things printed on it that are questing things on it, like swords and treasures and all that stuff. And then somehow there will be a goal card revealed that will tell you what you need for your quest. So the example they say is 2 swords and a cyclops might be a card. And then a 2-minute timer starts. And then your goal is to tear out whatever you need. So in this case, 2 swords and a cyclops in such a way that you tear them out cleanly. But there is something about like the back of the paper has like lines you can't cross or something. And so you have to tear out whatever you need to do to accomplish the quest before anybody else does. Sounds insane, but is also something I've never heard of before in a game. So just, I'm always interested in interesting gimmicks or, new mechanisms. So this seems like a game that works for that. So that is Tearable Quest by Shintaro Ono and art by Sai Beppu and released by Allplay.
Shintaro Ono is the designer of Make the Difference, which is also a very weird, gimmicky game. That's lovely that he's like sort of got this little niche. My number 4 is Furnace Duel. This is a 2-player version of Furnace, which was actually, I guess, a Gen Con darling from like 3 or 4 years ago. I really like Furnace. I think the thing that is especially appealing about this is kind of what you would have to tweak to the formula of Furnace to like make it accommodate this dual archetype that is all the rage right now, where we're sort of taking popular games and condensing them down to 2-player, adding on a couple of mechanics that really sort of like hone in on like the knife fight that you can get to. Like Splendor Duel has done this really well. Azul Duel did this really well. I'm hoping that Furnace Duel offers a similar thing. And some of the things that they're doing seem to lean in that direction. They're adding sort of a shared space board, which is you're also very directly fighting over with your opponent to like make connections, which I think is one of the ways you make that a lot more interesting as a 2-player game. And one of the other things that's also intriguing about that to me is that auction games not historically great at 2 players. So like I'm very curious to see like what they are doing to like really make this work at specifically a 2-player account with the core of Furnace that I thought is like really, really solid. It's a great core to like build off a more tight honed game on top of, because I would say that the worst thing about Furnace is that sometimes can feel like it's like over a little bit long. It's quite solitaire in the engine building, even though the auction mechanic is quite good and interactive. I'd love to see how that stuff gets enhanced into Furnace Duel.
I immediately filtered out all 2-player games.
So did I, actually.
Yeah, it's just like
that was my first thing. Yeah,
it's like you thought that the word duel was going to get people to rise up.
Yep, that's it. I mean, Azul Duel is great. Splendor Duel, it's great. These
Azul
are all great.
Duel is
we
not
just
great.
said
it is great. You haven't played it, so you
I
can't
haven't
say
played
that.
it. I can't say it. Azul 2-player is great. Why did we need to add the word duel to it? We were already in a duel to the death.
Neil, we just said the first way to tell if a game is good is if it has a high player count.
Yeah.
Yes.
And this
does
is
your game
the
go
other
up to
way.
50?
It's like
No,
both
it stops at
directions.
2.
Does it go all the way down to 2, and does it go all the way up to 50? Both ends. Very interesting games.
No, but your game doesn't go anywhere. It stays.
Yeah,
Can't
still,
go.
You know.
Terrible Quest can go. I can go at 2, or I can go at 50. You're stuck at 2.
Yeah, but like
Problem.
this game, think about like how like perfectly tuned around that specific player count this is. Like, I bet Terrible Quest starts to break down at 48 players. Like, they're lying to you, what the fuck.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. I am back up. My third most anticipated game of Gen Con, I think, is another one that was not available in English and is now being brought to the US by Devere. And that is, I'm going to mispronounce this, Koinobori. It is a sort of a set collecting plus filler game with some interesting decisions. Koinobori is the sort of kites that look like fish that you sort of see, like traditional. And in this game, you are collecting sets of cards, and on your turn, you're sort of deciding whether to put something into your own personal scoring pile or into the center of the table. There are these sort of festival masks, and the colors that are most numerous in the festival are the only ones that will score. So you're making that critical decision between, do I want to bank points in this color, or do I want to ensure that this color scores? I can't think off the top of my head what set collecting games this is like, but I do love that tension of like, if I don't commit this to the scoring, it won't score, or I can get more points. And so that leads to a lot of situations where you're paying attention to what everyone is doing and what every color players are interested in. This comes to us from the designer of Salton Sea, which is a game I have not played but has popped as a recent game that people are excited about. Mark, did you talk about this at some point?
No, I have Salton Sea and I've been eager to play, but I have not yet played it. I've heard good things, though.
Yeah, I've just heard good things as well. And this has like beautiful cover art. And I just, again, I'm in this like, sort of lighter era right now and just enjoying this theme here a lot. And this feels just like a filler game that we would have a really good time with. That is Koinobori, and I can confirm it's Japanese because it says Japan on here. So, confirmed.
Perfect.
We confirmed it here.
Confirmed.
Yeah.
My number 3 game is Galileo Galilei. I'm a little nervous about putting this on my list because I know way back when we started doing these Gen Con top 5 lists, I was really excited about Newton.
The game board is all tracks, but it tries to pretend that it's not.
That's true. It is very tracky. Not in the same way as Rise is tracky, but in a different kind of way. But I remember being very, very excited about Newton, thinking, oh, I'm going to be living the life of Newton and discovering all this stuff. And then again, it was a very tracky game. It's fine, but just not what I was hoping for. And so I'm worried that Galileo Galilei is going to be tricking me in the same way. However, are you guys familiar with like Victor Wembanyama or Lamine Yamal?
No.
All right.
These are two.
These are just two words that you've made up to try to trick us into sounding dumb.
They are very funny sounding words. In fact, they're very funny sounding names because they're names of two of upcoming, very, 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 very good players. Wembanyama is a up and coming basketball player. He's probably going to be one of the better basketball players of all time in a couple of years. And Lamine Yamal is a very good soccer player. Anyway, these are phenoms who are taking the world by storm. And I bring them up because Galileo is designed by Thomas Holick, who I think is maybe one of the next great designers. He designed SETI, which is getting a lot of praise, and now Galileo, and he's got some other games in the pipeline that I've heard good things about. Tea Garden seems to be like a mid to heavyweight designer So I'm looking forward to this. I've heard good things about it. I've heard that it is a Euro game, full of crunchy decisions and all that stuff. And so, I mean, that's not the highest of praise, but I heard, again, really good things about SETI in the same way, in terms of like a medium-heavy game, medium-heavy Euro that was done well. So I'm interested to see what his production maybe is a harbinger of perhaps for future games. So yeah, excited to try this and SETI out. I haven't had a chance to play that either, but Galileo Galilei, a mid to heavy Euro that I'm curious to try out.
In a similar vein, a designer that I'm keeping my eye on, Rainer Knizia, up and coming, big name. Mark my words, it's going to be a big name in like a year from now. He is remaking Merchants of Amsterdam into Merchants of Andromeda. I'm not familiar with Merchants of Amsterdam. Have either of you played that?
No.
It rings a bell.
The reason I know Mark hasn't played this, actually, is because one part of the description of Merchants of Amsterdam is having a Biblios-like mechanic, and I just feel like we would have never heard the end of that, where you draw three cards, and you have to choose how to allocate those three cards on your turn. Anyway, the other half of this is kind of like a mini game style structure, which we've seen Reiner do in other stuff, like Millefiori comes to mind. And I kind of like that idea, where it's like, where are you committing your focus? Which of these games are you going to focus on? Are you going to try to be the sole proprietor of this mini game? Or are you going to try block Helen as he's trying to like win on this mini game?
This sounds ripped off from Party Panda Pirates.
It's one of those games that kind of is trying to do a lot of things while having like a auction style structure to like how you're deciding like where you're allocating your focus. It seems like it's been quite heavily redeveloped from the original, which, is not a game that I think is necessarily took the world by storm, but this seems to have like significant development, and I've heard a reviewer describe it as the Yellow and Yangtze, two tigers and Euphrates, in terms of like streamlining, redeveloping, changing it in a way that kind of feels a lot more modern, for my taste at least. So I really like the idea of what's happening in Merchants of Andromeda. Very intrigued to check that out at the soonest opportunity.
Knizia's take on Biblios, my goodness. Although
I think that's maybe overselling how much Biblios there is in this to some extent, but like, it's that central idea of like, I have to do three different things with three of these cards. How do I choose to do them? Which I guess apparently is called a Dutch auction, but I've never heard that before.
Never been.
I've definitely heard of Dutch auctions before, but I didn't know what they actually meant. But yeah, certainly piqued my interest.
Okay, so I actually think, and Neelan, well, for the bit, it's not a bit. This is really the number 2 game on my list. We, at one of our first Gen Cons, I believe, played the game that this is a reimplementation of. That is One Custom Hero.
Yes. If you didn't mention this, I was going to mention this at some point. Yeah, yes. Because that was part of our first Gen Con memory, was playing Custom Heroes.
All right. So, and this was in an era where sort of the ladder climbing, trick-taking renaissance. We weren't amongst the greats. But Custom Heroes and the game that I'm talking about today, Ruins with an S. Runes are magical and dumb. Ruins is the name of this game. It comes to us from John D. Clare. John D. Clare utilizing the card crafting system. He's a smart man because he has somehow trademarked card crafting for literally adding transparency to cards. If you've not played one of these games, you can do this in, Mystic Vale, Dead Reckoning, amongst others, where you actually have cards that sort of, it's almost like they have their own sleeves, but you have ways to like slot in transparencies so that cards themselves can get upgraded. So it's not like a deck builder where you are getting more cards for your deck. You are literally upgrading the cards that are already in your deck or in your hand. So Custom Heroes took that principle, and it could have been the first card crafting game. I'm not sure.
I think it was technically, yeah.
Yeah. And it is being revisited here as a streamlined reimplementation, redo for modern sensibilities. And the reviews are strong. And I think that I am in the era where I am enjoying the sort of party-ish, silly-ish, the Mino dices of the world, the Seas of Strife of the world. Rebel Princess, another one that I have that I really want to play. We just played Tournament at Avalon and had a great time. I feel like Ruins fits in really well with that, or will fit in really well. And I think that Custom Heroes was just, before its time. Do you know what I mean? Where it's like it was the right game at the wrong time.
I agree with that. I always felt like Custom Heroes was better than people gave it credit for, because it's very, very silly and like in a way that just kind of felt really dopey fun. So I would love to see that revisited and even improved, if that's the aim here.
And it's a blast from our past, our very first Gen Con, where we braved the heat. And where was Mark but nowhere to be found?
It was too hot for me.
Yeah.
I couldn't stand the heat, so I got out of Indianapolis. Sort of along the same lines as Tearable Quest, my number 2 earns its spot on the list just because it introduces what I think is like a interesting mechanism. This is Slam Throne. This comes to us from the folks who brought us Dice Throne. And this is the same sort of thing with Dice Throne, where you have asymmetric characters and you're fighting somebody else. But instead of having a Yahtzee slant, this is going to be Pogs.
Huh.
You guys remember Pogs?
Yeah, of course, yeah.
Pogs are... Oh, you do remember Pogs?
Yeah.
Okay, I thought it was before your time. I suspect it's before Kellen's time.
No.
Pogs?
No. I had my Slammer, I'll have you know.
Okay.
It was...
Okay.
Actually, I can't remember now. It was a hockey team for some inexplicable reason. Anaheim
Yeah.
Ducks? Is that a hockey team?
Yeah.
All right. That was
Also
my
known as
Slammer.
Anaheim Ducks. But
Funny thing about Pogs, like we never had like official Pogs in South Africa, but there was like a local rip-off version that was all themed around rugby. So that was my I think it was like Rugby Slammers. I can't remember what it was called. And as someone that had like zero interest in rugby, I was obsessed with getting like all of the specific
Did
teams.
you guys play where like if you won, you like took their Pogs? Like this was we used to play for
100%.
keeps.
Yeah,
and you had like
take
your
one
little
from them. Yeah,
you had like the plastic thing where you were keeping them all. Like this game was no joke. But Mark, you must have the memory of. Actually, this game has 6 designers listed on BGG, so I'm curious to hear what work they've done meticulously over the last 20 years since we all last played it.
Well, I know Gavin Brown, and so I suspect maybe the rest of the team is part of the Roxley team that brought us the reimplementation of
Gavin Brown,
Brass and,
Birmingham. And then now his next magnum opus, Slam Throne.
I've played Dice Throne a couple times and I enjoyed it, but I know there are people who are huge fans of it. For all my big talk about Pogs, and I certainly remember the fad, I played it very, very occasionally. So I didn't play it so much. I certainly didn't play it for keeps in the bloodthirsty way you're talking about doing it. But I do like the idea of trying to bring back this, long gone style of play and bringing it to the board game arena. So I'm really interested to see how you bring Pogs into modern board games. So that is Slam Throne.
This is like either the newest trend in board gaming or Mark is taking a swing and a miss here with this number 2. But I'm excited to find out. I would play Slam Throne. I'm going to be honest, okay?
Yeah.
I will play Slam
for
Throne.
Sure.
I'm in.
My number 2 game is Lightning Train. I'll be honest, there's not a whole lot.
Oh, this is Paul Denon, right?
This is Paul Denon, yes. There's not a whole lot of information I can find about this, except by looking at it and the description, you have what looks like a Ticket to Ride, Railways of the World style train game, and is described as mixing all that up with bag building, which is a very interesting combination. And that might not be enough if not for the name Paul Denon, who is genuinely, as much as I was riffing on that earlier with Reiner Knizia, is genuinely the designer who I'm probably most following as he's just getting just on this like upwards trajectory in board games. Came off the bat with Clank, Eternals, Chronicles of the Throne, now, a slam dunk with Dune Imperium recently. He is just continuously one of the more interesting designers in the space, for my taste at least. And his take on a train game is something I would be fascinated to see how that pans out. So that is Lightning Train by Paul Denon.
All right. The game that I am looking forward to most and must purchase it's almost like I'm so excited for this game that I fear raising awareness about it because I may struggle to get a copy of it. The name of the game that I am most excited about for Gen Con 2025 is called Guessocracy. Take that as a word. Guessocracy, roll and vote. Okay, so we got a lot packed into here, okay? This game is Japanese. It has an amazing cover. In this game, I think I understand it. Okay, the translation is here. I think I understand it. You roll a ton of dice, okay, of different colors and different sizes. There's 3 different size dice. then the entire table has 3 seconds with which to evaluate them, and then they are covered up, okay? And then players have to vote secretly on either the least common or the most common face value that they saw. And you're not trying to get it right, because that would be boring, like, ricochet robots. What you're trying to do is get in the majority vote. So whatever people perceive to be the most common or the least common is actually correct, and that's how you score points. So a dice voting party game where the truth is decided by the majority vote. I love this. It's not really about truth at all. It's about how you vote. And then if you're in the minority, you can object to argue that was in fact not the right thing. And if you object, you can earn a lot of bonus points, but if you're wrong, there's a significant penalty. So this game it's a political, betting, bluffing, voting. It really aims to simulate a lot of the things that are going on in the United States of America right now. And so it's obvious, based on the cover and based on the dice and based on the mechanisms, why this would be my number one. What do you guys think? You're in?
That's great.
Yeah, it sounds really interesting. I love the idea of trying to discern what you think people would have seen, even if you think that the truth is something else.
Listen, the truth is decided by the majority vote, Mark. I think I just want to make sure that's clear.
History is written by the victors, as they say.
Yes. That is how things work in a Guessocracy. My number one, Guessocracy : roll and vote. If this sells out as a result of this podcast, I hate you all. And we can just bleep the whole segment so that I can make sure that I get one of these.
Deal. Kellen brought up his game having to do with things going on in the United States nowadays. And I don't know if you've heard, but the Pope is from the United States. And so my number one game in honor of that is Habemus Papam, which comes to us from Francisco Gardali and published by Salt and Pepper Games. This is a game about electing a pope. So I'm caught up in the whole American Pope conclave hype that is sweeping the United States. So this is apparently a game about using political intrigue and making deals in order to get your preferred candidate elected as pope. And so I like the idea of interaction and wheeling and dealing, and I like the historical sort of feeling of doing it to elect a pope. And I'm a sucker for political thrillers like Conclave, and so if this game can get that vibe across, I'm all for it. And the designer has some history in creating historical based war games. So yeah, I'm just really interested in what you could do with electing a pope. So Habemus Papam is my number one game for Gen Con 2025.
My number one game for Gen Con is Into the Machine, which is another one I don't know a whole lot about. But let me sell you on this real quick. This is a light, under an hour race game where it kind of has a tag team component where you're sort of racing a robot from one end of the track to the other. Then you have to tag your robot to get back to the other side. It has a light worker placement. Is that right? Worker placement? Is that the right word?
For what?
Worker placement, what that's called?
What you call placing workers?
Yes.
Like
yeah,
in
okay,
curriculum?
so as soon as I said it, something went wrong in my brain. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I get you.
It has a light worker placement element, which is how you are deciding how to manipulate your robots up and down the track. And the kicker for me is that this is designed by Casper Lapp, who is a designer who I feel like always comes out of nowhere with the weirdest designs and knocks it out of the park consistently. So I'm all on board for Into the Machine as a fun, silly, Euro-y adjacent race game by a really fun, quirky designer. That is Into the Machine.
Okay, I am big up on the designer. Agree with you. AEG?
Yeah, that's definitely hard to say. I'm not going to write off a publisher entirely, I guess.
But they have Space Base. Yeah. They have Istanbul, of
yeah,
course.
Exactly. Yeah.
They have War Chest. Cascadia, Dead Reckoning. No, I mean they have a lot of like bona fide hits in here.
Yeah, I would agree with you. It's funny because to some extent to me that was like a positive that this wasn't just kind of like a weird thrown away design. Like it caught.
It's a real publisher.
Yeah, exactly. So there's something there, and like you said, like Casper Lapp just doesn't really miss.
totally.
I don't know if you guys have mentioned Lap a couple times, but just in case listeners aren't familiar, his games are fantastic. You got Magic Maze, That's Not a Hat, which is a BGB favorite. Fun Facts, which I love as well. Five Towers, Gods Love Dinosaurs. So a lot of really fun, as Nealon said, like really interesting games.
And all completely different. Like they're all just like complete.
Yeah.
None of them feel like something you've played before, and they're all bangers. Yeah.
Nealon, I don't agree with you, but I respect the conviction. Just want to go out with that. Mark, I don't respect you.
No, I knew that going into it. Speaking of going in, we are going out on that. And so that's going to do it for our Gen Con 2025 preview. Let us know in the Discord what games
Speaking of
you
going
are
out, we're
in.
going in. What did you say?
I'm always segueing. I'm always trying to Speaking of going in, we're going out.
Yeah.
We are going out. This is a perfect segue if you haven't ruined it. So, yeah, let us know in the Discord what you think of the games we've selected. If there are games that you're interested in playing that are coming out in Gen Con, let us know about those. I would love to hear about those because I find myself in a quagmire trying to figure out all the games that are coming out at Gen Con. And so let us know. If you're going to Gen Con, we would love to hear what you think of the games when you get a chance to play them. That'd be great. You could do that again at the Discord, in the podcast channel, and the board games channel. There's a bunch of channels to go and talk in. If you want to talk about Victor Wembanyama or Lamine Yamal, you can do that in the sports channel. See, you can cover whatever you want to talk about in those channels. You can talk to us there. You can write us at boardgamebarrage@gmail.com. You can find us on all forms of social. You can thank Heart Society, if you can find them, for giving us our intro and outro music, What's on Your Mind, Kid? And until next time, if you're going to Indianapolis, bring your asbestos suit because it's hot out there. Goodbye.
Wear sunscreen.